Welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Mike Arnold. Mike is a work-at-home entrepreneur. He has skills that range from business management to business development, time management, strategy, efficiency coaching, and much more. Mike, glad to be talking to you.
Yeah, good to be here, Robert. Thanks.
Very welcome. Just before this call, I went and looked you up real quick. I saw you have like a book called Slacking Off, but can you tell us what you're all about and what your focus is these days?
I'm a work from home entrepreneur. I work right now in the medical field, medical technology. I basically am all about being efficient, as efficient as you can be working from home and helping others balance their work-life situations. And obviously want to talk about the book that I wrote to help people just be happier working from home and be more efficient and being more present and there.
Well, lots of things to talk about there because, guys like you and me doing the work at home thing, we were kind of weird for a bunch of years, right? Where everyone else was like the 9 to 5 was the norm. And then all this crazy stuff happened in the world and then it flipped on us a little bit. And I don't know about you, Mike, but it was first of all, it was such a trade-off. I felt like a lot of the time that I got from not commuting and not having to do all the office stuff, I got this extra time, but then I know I didn't use it right. And I had to come up with some new strategies, like get myself motivated and things like that. And so what have you noticed? Like, what have been your difficulties and what have you had to kind of do that maybe took a little bit of work in order to make the most out of this work from home time?
Are you speaking post-COVID, or are you speaking just in general working from home? Because obviously there's different scenarios that have taken place more recently.
Well, there's different scenarios, but I mean, like, as far as like you personally, Mr. Mike Arnold, what have you struggled with as far as this whole time management from home thing?
I mean, I've been working from home for 15 years, right? So today, what I struggle with is totally different than what I struggled with in the beginning. But ultimately, I think every person working from home, or actually, I won't say I know, runs into situations that they could have handled better. So for me, I think it would just really go into all the things that pull your attention in one direction or another, and making a decision on whether or not you should have spent time taking that phone call or writing that email or doing that one thing when you could have been more efficient. I think a lot of people just kind of go throughout their day just trying to be the best they can be and handling everything that they have coming at them. And I think for me, it's a constant, is this the most efficient thing I can be doing in this moment? And when, I work for a corporation, it was, is this the most appropriate meeting for me to be having right at this moment? Is this the most efficient, whether it's monetarily or it's can this go the distance? Is this really the best thing for my time? And that's something I still run into today. I'm sitting still, I'm reading something, I'm taking a course, I'm teaching somebody something, I'm presenting something, and I definitely want to make sure that one, I'm present, and two, that what I'm doing is efficient and worth it, right? Worth it to me, worth it to whoever's on the other end, and worth it to my future. So I think I would just say the things that really randomly take place in the middle of what you're trying to focus on, and making the right decision to either take it or not take it, right? I mean, there's a lot of philosophies out there of like just handle everything that comes your way, which I believe in to a degree. But then you get a phone call from a coworker or a friend that wants to talk to you about something that really doesn't matter. You don't want to be rude to them, right? You definitely don't want to be a bad friend or coworker. But the truth of the matter is that's not as important as what you may have to do right at that very moment. So making the right decision for yourself and your future on a daily basis and an hourly basis, on a minute basis, is necessary in order to function and be successful, in my opinion. And so that's really, a lot of this is built on that. It's built on me looking back and saying, man, I dug myself in a huge hole because I kept answering the phone. I kept taking that meeting, whether it was a boss or a friend or a client, when it wasn't appropriate. And, maybe it was once, maybe it's twice. And then digging into the things that take your time away, like being on social media or just being idle too much, right? Because you didn't get that idle time that you were looking for in the beginning of the day. So now you're doing it throughout your day and you're taking away from all the things you're doing, right? That happens to all of us, I'm sure, right? In some degree or another. And so I think it's just really more, like I said, things that take your attention away where you don't even notice. And I'd say that's probably the biggest culprit of inefficiency, is not paying attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, and there's so much to think about. And as you're kind of describing, do I do this or do I do that? It almost feels like you can't win, right? It's like you have like there's probably like maybe 5 or 6 possible templates for the way that your day could go, and there's like maybe the worst possible scenario, which is nothing done, total waste of time. And there's maybe like, well, do all these things in parallel or get to these different appointments, but there's space in between. And it seems like there's like the least worst option, right? And it seems like there's never a perfect day, and there's always like a million things going on. And so, you and I are kind of similar here, Mike, in that we've been at this for a decade plus, right? We've both been working from home for over 10 years. And, 10 years ago, there was like different, like, I think that the distractions were not as aggressive as they are now with the social media, but also it took me a while to figure out simple things like, close my office door, which is still kind of relevant today, or things like have a Google Calendar or have appointments on the calendar, which are all things that just like were things that I had to figure out slowly over time. And then what's cool now, as you and I know, is that these last couple of years, video chat has become way better, way more reliable, way easier, way faster. You click a button and you do it. But I sometimes think that if I was younger, if I was in school nowadays with Facebook and texting and all the distractions, I'd probably be an F student. And I have to really put forward like the willpower in order to resist the new temptations. So it kind of feels like a trade-off to me. Like we get all these new productivity tools and a lot of things are easier. You don't have to spend a week formatting and setting up your computer. You just like use an app or you use stuff in the cloud. But then there's all that comes with this price of all these other things popping up. And, you mentioned a few minutes ago here that, there's a difference between the way it's always been and then kind of the COVID challenges and the post-COVID challenges. So can you tell me what you've been seeing as far as like maybe the last couple of years or couple of months? Like what are the recent new problems that people are having versus the problems that have already existed as far as working from home?
I don't know if they're necessarily that I'm seeing different problems other than more higher volume of those problems. The problems are the same. It's really just the volume. But first I want to say, you hit the nail on the head about feeling like you can't win. That's actually the whole reason I wrote this book, right? Is for the person who feels like they can't win and that no matter what, somebody's going to suffer, because that's not true. It's true if you make it true, but it's definitely not true if you handle things properly and have a plan for yourself that you created. But I would say, to answer your question, it's really, the typical things, doing something too long, right? Like that's not work related, working too much because you're working from home on your own. And therefore, if the truth is averaged across all people, we're our own worst critic, we're our own worst boss, we're our own worst slave driver, we're everything. And we're probably, we'll either make ourselves have a lot of lazy time or we'll work really hard. There's really not a very good in between for most people. Some people maybe, but generally people that work from home for a long period of time, and you can attest to this, work longer and more than they did when they worked in an office. And I know that's true for me because I think just from the things I wanted to accomplish just yesterday on a typical weekend, I work 7 days a week because I like what I do. But like I was doing something, studying something till like 1 a.m. last night or this morning, right? And if I was working at a 9 to 5, I might not have been doing that. I might have been doing something else, whatever the case is. That's just my time. But I think it's just more high volume of not prioritizing the things I do because I feel like I have a bunch of time that I really don't. not prioritizing myself, right? So somebody not prioritizing what makes them happy before they start their workday. Because at the end of the day, one of the biggest principle that I write, and this is the whole reason I wrote it, is that I notice when I'm 100% dedicated to me first, my performance is amazing, like almost effortless in a way. When I'm feeling great and I'm doing things for myself, eating right, just exercise, whatever makes me happy, reading, studying, whatever I like to do, make time for myself to do that, and then the rest of the day is amazing for me, and I can handle everything else. It's funny, being efficient is harder than working out. How many people like working out in the beginning? Almost no one, right? And so being efficient is harder because you have to pay closer attention to what you're actually doing. And that's really the toughest thing, is that, it's what do I consider slacking off, right? The name of the book, Slacking Off. What do I really think slacking off is? Well, for me, it could be reading. But to somebody else, that could be not slacking. That's like, wow, that's really good. You should be reading. Some people, it might be Facebook. But that's the point is that you really have to have time for yourself first. And then, of course, you can handle all these other things that come in your way, and some of the other things. The one thing I'll say that I haven't touched on, which I know is a big problem for people who work from home for a long time, even more now, is camaraderie, right? That in person, like shoot the opinions around the office and blah, 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 blah. But I think really, truly, this is the dividing line right now that's telling a lot of companies and people what they really want, right? Like if you work from home for a year, if it's for you, right? There's people that surprise me when they're like, yeah, I can't wait to go to the office. I'm like, that's like foreign language. That's alien to me. I'm like, what is that? Like, go to an office. Like, who wants that? You can do so much more when you own your time. But that's the key, is it's a journey to get to the point where you can actually own your time working from home and not just slave driving yourself, right? There's a certain difference, of course. So anyway, that's a little bit not sequential in number of things, but that should give you some good perspective, at least from my viewpoint.
Yeah, it gives us a few things to chew on. And I think that of those things you listed, what hits me the most is have a plan of any kind. And it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because you think, well, I want freedom. I should just be able to sit down and do whatever I want. And it's like, yeah, but wouldn't it be better if you sat down and then planned what it is that you wanted, and then went ahead and did that? And it's like, it took me forever to think about, because I always thought that, well, like freedom equals not having a plan, but it's kind of the opposite, right? Like you think that intuitively, but then if you don't have a plan, then you don't have freedom, because the time gets away from you and you're just at the mercy of whatever distractions come in, and there aren't boundaries and all that kind of stuff. And so what I liked a lot how you said there that working from home, you can tell pretty quickly whether or not it's for you just by doing it. And what you're making me think of is when I was working 9 to 5, like I had them switch my hours on some days to be super early so I could get in when no one else was working, and I could just get in and it was quiet, and I would get all my activities done, and I wouldn't have to be waiting on anyone else, and I wouldn't be distracted. And I was almost like working from home while I was there. And I was so grateful for things like remote desktop, because sometimes I could remote desktop like to work or from work and get something done on some other machine without having to physically be there, or like get something processing or get something started up and then pick it up later. And as far as the camaraderie piece, like I feel that falling off with myself more and more. Like I as soon as I hit so as soon as I started working from home, I remember the very first day, Mike, I put on like clothes, and my girlfriend at the time was like, why aren't you wearing your pajamas? And I was like, because like I need to be like an adult living person. I can't just be like an unshowered person. And I knew that there were things like there were certain like important ingredients that I had to maybe replicate in some way, such as the camaraderie piece. And like I joined like masterminds and things like that. But then when the pandemic happened, I don't know about you, but like I was so sick of being on Zoom calls. Like, you and me being on a Zoom call is great. I think you're one of 4 today that I have going on in my schedule. But like, if I had to be on like, 10 Zoom calls a day, or I don't know, like sometimes I just feel like going to these like once a month or once a week masterminds that I used to go to, it kind of felt like a break. It kind of felt like, okay, I'm like, it's my version of slacking off, right? It's going
Right,
out
right.
and networking. I don't have to be in front of a computer. I can just kind of talk and like have a conversation. But just when things were so more locked down and virtual and being on Zoom, like I've kind of found myself losing interest in meetings, in conferences and events if they all have to be on Zoom. So, I mean, can you relate to this, or is there a solution here to those of us that are just,
Uh,
I'm so tired of a computer screen. Can I just get a break?
So I'll tell you a quick story real fast. Yes, I can relate to this for sure. Um, you know, of course, the camaraderie is important. Masterminds are amazing, and I think that that is a good solution. But the reason why camaraderie is so good is because you're really kind of forced to be with that person, right? It's not like you chose to go to work with that person when you're an employee. When you're an employer, it's different, right? You choose your employees, totally different. But you're there for another reason rather than just hanging out, right? Hanging out is just a byproduct. So I think ultimately enforcing partnerships like that with coworkers and people you work with while working from home, it can be done very properly. And I'm actually working on this, as like a product and something that I'm thinking about. But yeah, it definitely will put you in a different place when you don't really have the right outlet, if you will, to get that like in-person interaction. And Zoom fatigue happens across like the country. I do Zooms every day, 7 days a week sometimes. Sometimes I do 5, 6, 7. I think I've done 7 or 8 back-to-back hour-long Zoom calls where I'm just, and I've definitely been there 100%. I think ultimately though, it really comes with being there comfortably and being able to actually 100% focus on who's in front of you, like you right now. Like I see you, and that's it. There's things around me, people around me, and I'm focused on you 100%. I noticed recently that I wasn't doing that, even just a little bit. My ability to speak, my ability to present, do anything, talk to anybody on Zoom was amazing. It was very good. I could do, have a good conversation, but there was just something missing, right? Just something missing. And I noticed that when I'm not focused directly on the person right in front of me, and I'm not pretending in my own little, imagination that they're standing in front of me, that something lacks for sure. And for me, that's like huge. Sometimes I'm dealing with, hundreds of thousands of dollars, over Zoom calls. I'm dealing with lots of different things that are very expensive for some people, not for others. And so that little tiny 10%, 1%, whatever you want to call it, that makes a huge impact. That could be $200,000, of a miss. So it's different when you're really, depending on what you're doing. For me, I feel like if you're going to do something, you need to do it all the way. You committed to doing it, whether you feel forced or not. If you're doing it, you committed. And sometimes I have to tell myself, I have to say, listen, you committed to this. I don't care if I feel like I don't want to do it. You committed. And if I committed, I'm going to do it. Right. And at the end of the day, like, what else do you have to lose than to be present 100%? Like Facebook, Twitter, your email, your girlfriend, your wife, your kids, all those things obviously are important, but they are not more important than you in your present moment doing what you need to do, unless it's an emergency, of course. Forgive that, of course. If there's an emergency, something happens, of course you're going to, let your attention go to that. But I'm just saying, in your day-to-day operations, you owe it to yourself to be everything you possibly can be and to constantly bring yourself into that. And I have to do it to myself even now, because as you become better at this, more things get in your way, right? The better you are, the more efficient you are, the harder it is to be efficient. It's not the other way around. See, right now, for anybody who's not trying to be efficient, it's fine, but they're missing everything, right? You have 24 hours in a day. You sleep for 8, you sleep for 7, you sleep for 6, whatever makes you comfortable. The rest, I mean, why would you waste that? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. but I understand how easily that can happen, right? So I'm elaborated a bit on your question, but it really is important. That's again the whole reason why I wrote this book, is because there's this like crazy spiral that happens for people that have more time, perception, right? More time, that they actually lose time way more if they fall in this trap of like, I can do whatever I want. Of course you can, but if you create your own plan and structure, and you have a emergency plan, so to speak, on how to handle things that come in your way, you at least will be better off than the person who doesn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yes, I know. I think I know what you mean. And there's so much to think about here as far as like one thing that you mentioned there is it's so easy to let one little bad habit slide and then it just gets away from you, right? And what
Yeah.
you and like such as not and such as allowing yourself to be distracted on a Zoom call or a podcast. Like there's for me, there's a webcam here. I could easily be on this screen, on that screen. I could easily be playing on my phone. And I mean, you and I have both been in situations, Mike, where like you can tell the other person's kind of sneaking a little glance here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And I dropped out of my Toastmasters because of that. Like I used Toastmasters to go and like test out material, and I'll like create a 5-minute speech and try something out I might want to use on like a stage presentation, podcast, webinar, and which was fine in person because I could see people's reactions, body language. It would help with my nervousness when I gave the actual speech. But when it turned into Zoom, I would just see people on the web cameras and they'd be distracted, looking away. And then I thought to myself, well, if they're looking away, isn't it okay for me to look away? And next thing you know, no one's paying attention to anyone else versus
Right.
being 100% there and being 100% somewhere else. And I mean, right before this call, I put the baby away for a nap for a couple of hours, and then I came to you. And whenever I see these appointments coming up on the calendar, sometimes I think, I have so many things going on. I should tell Mike that we need to reschedule for next week, and it would be so easy to do. But why not just do it? Because that's what I said that I was going to do. And in the same way that one little bad habit can spiral out of control into something else, you mentioned kind of that whole issue of once you become efficient, then you'll rise to even bigger challenges, right? It's like the levels in a video game. You start off in the easy level, you beat it and you beat it. And as you progress, it's like it's harder and harder, just like in your life and your business. You solve problems and it leads you to bigger problems, and it just requires you to kind of strengthen your resolve or whatever you want to call it. So there's a lot to think about here, but it seems to me that it comes down again to having a plan and having boundaries and just kind of like adhere to all these principles that maybe seem like cliches, but it's easy just to try to outsmart yourself and find all these ways around in multitasking and in putting things off and delaying, procrastinating, all those things. And so I can definitely see why there is very much a need for people like you to show us the way, to have a book out there like Slacking Off. And so I want to mention Slacking Off and some of your resources in a moment. But one thing I want to sneak in here in our questions is you mentioned at the beginning that you are a little bit involved in the medical field. And I love kind of plugging exactly what someone does in case that ideal prospect is kind of happens to be listening. So can you tell us about this medical thing that you're doing, just in case just the right ideal client for you is listening?
Yeah, I mean, I work currently in a medical technology company where I primarily speak with physicians and surgeons across the country. It's basically a home physical therapy technology. It's actually one of the first ever to be able to give a patient the ability to do all of their physical therapy in their house without anyone being there. Saves a ton of money in relation to people having to leave and worry about getting COVID, or elderly people. It also is something that's pretty much the most advanced in its field. And the company is named ROMTech, Range of Motion Technology. And it's up and coming. It's in Brookfield, Connecticut. But I basically have helped this company develop relationship with surgeons and hospitals, and help them kind of expand in the way of the way they want to operate or help patients. But really the technology helps people get better quicker, take less narcotics. I mean, there's a lot of major benefit in what we face as challenges as people and in medicine. And I think they launched their first couple products right before COVID. Then everybody was at home. And so it's a very wanted and needed item in the rehabilitation space, because obviously, physical therapy is there, but there's just not enough. There's not enough. People need more. And it's funny, the working from home thing is more, prevalent nowadays. But what happens when you're sitting down and you're working at home and you're not paying attention to the time and not taking care of yourself is more prevalent to me, because I speak to doctors of almost every specialty. And the one thing they tell me is, having a person move and have nutrition. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I also put this idea of having a plan and getting time for yourself in the book, is because the more I hear business owners and doctors who run, major surgery centers and offices who work from home, the more I realized I needed to create or finish this book, because I started writing it in 2019. I don't think I've ever come across a person that doesn't work from home in some form or fashion, whether employee or business owner, that can't use what I've written in this book and one of these very simple exercises to master their own thing. And it's really for them to create their own version, right? I didn't put in the book, here's an exercise, here's how I did it great, be like me. I put, here's an exercise of what I did to dig myself out of a hole, and here's how I did it the worst way possible, and this is why I did that. And then you create your own comparison, right? You can definitely do better than that. And so at the end of the whole thing, what the whole purpose of this is that take what you're doing working from home, reinvent it a bit, be better, and then you've learned enough skill here or enough information that you possibly didn't know to be, the one that can handle the bigger barriers, right? I want you to advance. I want you to have master your time, master yourself, and do it in the little ways. And then of course you want to take bigger leaps and do it with other tools and things, by all means. 4-Hour Work Week, Problems of Work. I mean, all these different books that I put at the back. There's 2 books that are just fundamental for helping me be amazing at working from home. And that's, all a part of it.
Well, I can tell you're passionate about what you do, and especially as far as helping out this medical company. I think I can tell it gives you a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And it's like, if you don't show up, if you miss these calls, if you don't do your work, then people will suffer. Like people's lives are improved by what it is that you do. And I mean, it seems like from what you're saying here is just like the magic of working from home and all the modern conveniences that we have is that anyone can find their right fit. You don't have to be stuck in an office. You don't have to be stuck in a career. You don't have to be stuck in a job that you don't want. You think about all these people that, lost these jobs that they had and never went back to those old jobs because they found online work. They found something that was better for them or more fulfilling, but maybe came with new challenges, time management challenges, physical challenges that you're mentioning. And so, yeah, and there's a lot to think about here. And kind of what you're kind of like, like when you talk to someone and it digs up all these old things in your brain, what it's digging up in my brain is a few years ago, there was some Gary Vaynerchuk video where he was saying like, in the old days, you'd work 18 to 65. Or you die, or maybe you die when you were like 60 or something, right? You'd get a job at PG&E and you just work all those decades and that was it. And you clocked in 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and that was all you had to worry about. But now we might live to be 100. We might be, working through our 80s and 90s, but not working in the same way that you'd, be like digging a ditch. You're working in a way that's fulfilling, that is maybe changing like 5 or 6 careers over your lifetime. And so what that says to me is by going through all that journey, like we can all find our right fit. And even just like some of the advice that you hinted at about your book, it's like there's kind of these modern day skills of trying to strike that balance between saying, okay, Mike has these principles and kind of this loose plan for me, and it's important for me to follow instructions and not just disregard what he says, but then also find out what is a custom solution for me. And it's kind of like just these two kind of barriers, right? There's on the one side, there's, well, can I follow some directions? But then on the other side end of it, can I have enough flexibility to try out what Mike is telling me in his book, Slacking Off, and see, well, is this strategy work, or do I do like this more like this 4-hour work week lifestyle? So there's just like so much to think about and so much to absorb about these kind of modern day skills where you're not just working in the factory, you're not just clocking in, clocking out. You might have to kind of think and adapt and adjust more than we have had to in the past decades. And so how do we get slacking off? And do you have any other websites, URLs to plug for us today?
Really, it's for sale on Amazon. You can get the hard copy, you can get the digital version, but that's the only place it's for sale. I don't have it for sale anywhere else. And honestly, that's really the main channel for somebody to get benefit working from home and learning. I mean, I think that truly, if somebody goes through it, like I said, doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter how good they are or how bad they are at working from home or being a remote worker, or even going into it, I think this would be beneficial. I mean, so one thing you mentioned to me is just makes me think about the first chapter of the slacking off list that I have everybody do as the beginning exercise. It's like, it doesn't matter if you've been working from home forever, everybody benefits from looking at what they do when they slack off. And until you actually take a day to figure that out, and truly avoid work for a full day, and then write down what you do and how long it takes you when you're slacking off, you really don't know. And that's, I think, that's the one piece. But not to go too far off into the tangent on that, I would just say if you like the book, obviously please do share it with somebody who you feel like would benefit. This was solely created to help somebody not fall into the pitfalls and the traps of being miserable working from home. I want to maintain the dream of enjoying working from home and having all those benefits. And so this is kind of like my way of trying to help people maintain that dream of working from home and enjoying it.
And we all could use a little bit of a push in the direction of that dream, right? Because
That's right.
there's what's envisioned, there's that perfect lifestyle, and then reality, well, sometimes doesn't quite match up to that, but maybe we could get closer to the dream if we get a little bit refocused. And it's easy to kind of let bad habits creep in, and then next thing you know, it's almost like driving a car blindfolded. You just kind of, you're going this way and that way. It's better to have more of a plan. And I like what you said there, Mike, of like, this is for so many people, right? This might be for someone who has just been dropped into the work from home experience because of, the career, or like the world changes. Maybe they're just now trying to figure out the work from home thing. Maybe they're like you and me, where they've been doing it for years and they could just use a refresher, or saying, it was working for a while, but now it's not quite working. I need to look at this book and figure out where the problem is. Or even there might be a little bit of someone who's like thinking about taking the leap, right? Someone who says, I hate this office thing, but I don't know if working from home would be better. Maybe I can check out this book and kind of have an idea of what it could be like, or figure out if it is for me. So if that sounds like you in podcast listening land, then check out the book Slacking Off on Amazon from Mike Arnold. Anything else to say here, Mike, as we wind down our conversation?
No, thank you. It was a good conversation. I definitely like your style, so I appreciate it.
Well, I like your style too. A couple of work from home guys just doing our own custom improvisational, fly by the seat of our pants thing. And we both have a lot of fun. We're both passionate. We're both pursuing and fulfilling our dreams. So if you two want to pursue your dreams, get the book Slacking Off, Mike Arnold on Amazon. You'll be glad you did.